Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kylie Stokes. This is Sight and Sound, a Living Atlas. This is my new project. I'm curating conversations with artists and practitioners about their relationship to place through sound and memory and different tactile practices. Today is episode 2. I interviewed Ford Fanter, my friend. He's a multi-hyphenate artist and performer based in Los Angeles. We talk about sort of the tension that he's experiencing, this liminal space that he describes in between the imaginary and sort of physical worlds. And in that, we talk a bit about the spiritual world as well, his relationship to spirituality as a practice of embodiment. Yeah, just keep that in mind. It does come up quite a bit. And the other thing, this is a video podcast. It is hosted on Substack. So we have captions available, which can be very helpful, especially for this episode. There's a little bit of audio clipping that happens. So if you have trouble understanding what's going on, just tune into the Substack. I'm very excited about this episode. Thank you very much, Ford, for being here, for your contribution to the Atlas. And yeah, let me know what you think. Enjoy the episode. I'll see you at the end. Thank you for being here, Ford. I'm so excited to talk to you. I would love to just get started talking about your experience as an artist. Just a brief introduction.
Okay, great. I've always kind of been a multi-hyphenate artist, and it's always been a very challenging thing for me to nail down exactly what it is I would say that I do or what I identify as. Traditionally, for the longest time, the main pursuit has been that of an actor. But even that, I can't even help but cringe a little bit when I say that word aloud, and I think I always have, because I don't know if I fully identify with it, but performer and like theater arts has always been something that I have been very interested in. And I've done a lot of stage, but I've also done a lot of film, and I've been in the film industry for many years. But I've also done a lot of character work. I do like solo shows and something kind of a hybrid of poetry and stand-up and storytelling and character work. I've drifted through the poetry scene in Los Angeles and a little bit in St. Louis when I was living there. But I'm also a musician. I play play a few instruments, and a songwriter and experimenter. I think that that's one of the things that I've realized actually lately, is that as an artist, I kind of feel like a scientist a little bit. And so there are various methods that I have found I need to use to gather data. So it never really looks the same over time. I'm consistently changing. I've self-published a book of poetry. That was an experiment. So I think a lot of artists kind of work in that zone. So it's kind of shifting consistently. And right now I am in a seismic shift. I don't really know where I'm going to land. So you've caught me interestingly enough, in a liminal space in my own creative zone. So it'll be interesting. I don't even know what I'm going to say as far as some of the answers to the later questions, because I'm in a very new stage of life. It feels like I don't know how else to describe it.
How have you been coping with that change?
It has been a challenge for me because I have strongly identified with artists and creative in such a way and to such an intensity that I've built a lot of identity and sort of egoic safety around that. And I am feeling a little bit of a terror, because that is sort of being dislodged in a lot of ways, or I'm being encouraged in some way within and without to I wouldn't say fully let go of that, but to allow myself to let go of the idea of it, because I can feel, like I said, the seismic shift. I've always had to go where my interests were, and I can feel my interests changing a little bit. And I have found that creative projects that used to be very engrossing to me are not holding my attention as much. And things that are still creative, that I have less of an association with the creative or the artist pursuit, these things have been capturing my attention. And so it's like I don't really know what to do with all of it. And it's been sort of disruptive, and it's been difficult for my perfectionist mind and my ambitious mind to reckon with this potential change of course, or to even entertain the possibility is very disconcerting in a lot of ways that I am surprised by. I wasn't expecting this to happen. I think I was always afraid of it happening, but I don't think I ever really thought it would. And it's a weird, I don't really know, like I said, where I'm going to land. Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with place, like actual location as well?
I think it may. I've been talking with a good friend of mine who just moved out of Los Angeles, and she has had a sense of this weight being lifted. And she, in the last year or so, maybe even 2 years in Los Angeles before she moved, there was a sense of a lot of what I am experiencing, this sort of blockage, this sense of like the things aren't that used to really light me up aren't lighting me up anymore. And I do wonder if I'm experiencing the same thing. I've asked myself that question, like, am I just uninspired by my environment? Have I been in the same kind of loop over and over, and it's not really feeding me as much, which is why getting outside is so very important to me. I have really had a lot of rumblings, or at least there's a lot of peace of mind that I acquire when I do go outside, especially when I take the chance to go to a trail or some place that I haven't been to before. That is very replenishing. Not even just replenishing, it's and inspiring. I don't know if that feels like exactly the right word either, but it feels purposeful, or at least, oh man, the word escapes me. But yeah, I've been asking myself that question because I think there is also this sense that I have an exoskeleton that is getting uncomfortable. And I'm like, I need to get out of this thing a little bit and shed a little bit of it. And it's part of it is that I think in the mental and spiritual space, but it's also I want to see things that I haven't seen. I had a moment where I was hiking at night a week or two ago, 2 3 weeks ago, and there was a super moon, and I didn't realize there was on that night. And I turned around when I got up to, there's a particular peak in Griffith Park on Hogback Trail that for years, when I go on my hikes, I go up on that peak and I sit, and it's usually a place of prayer or meditation. It's a place I specifically associate with a communication spot with the divine for myself. It's kind of a shrine in my mind. And I got up to that spot. When I turned around, I saw this big moon, biggest moon I've ever seen in my life. And I just had this, I think I said it aloud. I was like, I need to get out more. I need to go more places, because the experience of seeing that, all these places that may or may not exist, like flash through my mind, like Northern Lights, or like all these things where it's like, I want to have this experience more, where I stand in front of something and I look at it and I go, wow, this is out here. You can see this kind of beautiful stuff. Like, wow, I need to see more of that, you know, breathtaking, big, overwhelming things that I haven't seen before. So yeah, I think place is very much attached to this. Um, I'm sure I could find more examples of how. I don't know if it's the only thing, but it is certainly contributing to this experience.
That's so interesting. So it's sort of like a sense that the world is feeling too small where you are at this moment.
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think I hate to say that I'm bored, because I do believe the old adage that only boring people get bored. But I think that maybe that is sort of what I'm feeling about myself. Is like, I feel like I'm boring right now. I'm tired of looking at the same things. Granted, I do love LA, and I'm having a lot of fun in LA. I recently got a motorcycle, and so I'm seeing and experiencing it in a little bit of a different way, which is great. And I'm not locked in the car with this, ensconced in this thing with music playing. My senses are alert. I am paying attention to everything. So it is kind of revitalizing some of the familiar things, kind of recontextualizing them. I'm seeing a lot of roads that I go down with new eyes and new sensory experience. which is exciting. But I don't know how long that will last before I get more of that feeling. I have visions in my mind of watching you know, d- I've seen some of your pictures of the beach in Florida. I have memories as a kid of going to Florida and seeing a thunderstorm roll in. That doesn't happen here, you know. We have very kind of bland beach experience. Like there's a difference between, and I didn't realize that moving to California that Florida beaches are different from there's a whole different experience that you get, like the way the air smells and feels, and that pre-storm kind of like gusts that start blowing, and you feel the change in pressure and the moisture in the air. And I can sense some of those things that I experienced in childhood from vacations that were like these magical moments in a place that was unfamiliar. And I think that I'm really craving more of that. And I think it's because I am getting to an age where I'm grappling with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of, I've always kind of been a nostalgic, but I think I'm really coming to a different awareness of how much my memories sort of mean to me. And there's a lot of emotional baggage, feels like a heavy word, but it's a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on. And I think you get to a certain age. I'm 35 now. You have time that you can really look back on. Like there does feel like a threshold. You cross a threshold where you go, oh, I'm not just cruising. Now I've accumulated, and I can actually look back on quite a lot of stuff and see things that have happened with new eyes. And so I think that in the process of experiencing a sort of like, where am I? There's the natural sense of, well, how did I get here? You know, so I don't remember where that point came from.
No, that's okay. It's great. I think that's a very interesting place to be. I'm curious, when you talk about memory, are there specific places other than, when you think about Florida beaches or something like that, are there other places from the past that sort of come to mind where you've hiked or spent time outdoors?
My family, I think it was in 1994 or 1995, and I was about 4 or 5. We took a trip out west, and it's like the family trip out west. There's a few pictures of it hung in mom and dad's house. And it took me a little while to realize, but over the last couple of years, I really realized like, oh, that was one of the most pivotal things in my life. Like such a formative memory of this mysterious world. And we went to Utah, Arizona, Colorado. I'm trying to think if there were other places. We went to Four Corners, we went to the Grand Canyon, we went to Bryce Canyon and Devil's Thumb, and there were other. I get emotional just thinking about it because it's almost like mythic in my mind. These moments of being out in Monument Valley, like seeing the Anasazi settlement in the canyon, and that being in those little pueblo buildings, those clay buildings, and just the sound of like being with the way a group of people like tourists sound in the little echoing walls of those spaces, and you feel the sound of like kind of the dirt crinkling, and there's like a sensory experience that's like very like, oh, that's tourist. Or being somewhere in the sand dunes, some sand dunes with like a thunderstorm coming over the horizon, and the way it was just this black cloud with these, and every once in a while we had walkie talkies because we had two cars, like my cousin's car, and we were in a van. But I think we also had the radio on, and you'd see these bright spires of lightning, like the electric blue lightning shooting down towards the earth, and every time it would, you'd hear the radio crackle, like with the electricity, and just like that, the bigness of that. I think I knew ever since that I was like, I'm going to live out west. I have to live out in the west because I've been there, so it's familiar, and it has but it was so scarce that it was like this dream. Um, yeah, just all the red and the tan, and seeing cacti for the first time in Phoenix, where my uncle lives, and those, especially those ones with like the three, it captured my imagination so much as a kid. And I still feel like I'm chasing that. And especially having lived out west for many years and still having only scratched a surface of all the places there are to go. Every time I'm in a place like that, there is a sort of like, oh yeah, I remember this. I wonder what else? Because there was also fireflies. I haven't seen fireflies in a little while, but I was telling somebody about cicadas because in California we have some, but not in the sense that we do in Missouri in the Midwest, where you can tell what time of day it is just by the sound the cicadas are making. And there's a very specific, almost like early picture in my mind's eye of seeing the sun shooting through a tree line at the early evening in a summer, early spring or late summer, even sometime in one of those transitional periods of the seasons, and the cicadas are doing that. And that like moment, half a second long, is like almost feels like if I trace my mind all the way back as far as it'll go, that's one of the earliest like moments that consciousness like appeared in my mind, which is so cool. I don't think I've ever articulated that before or ever like it's been in my mind, but it's like this is the first time I've probably said that out loud and realized like, whoa, that's insane. I really am attached to that sound and super, I would imitate it as a kid.
It's definitely one of the most incredible things I've heard while being in Florida. Um, and it happens all throughout the day. And it's kind of what got me started on this project, wanting to record it and find ways to learn how to record it properly and things like that. But the cicadas, it's unlike anything I've ever heard.
Had you never heard or at least like really been in that kind of environment before?
I have heard, I mean, there have been other sounds like when I lived in Cape Town or just abroad in other places, but not like Florida. It's just been different.
Wild. And there's frogs too, right? Like there's got to be a mixture of like cicadas, katydids, frogs, and it varies throughout the day because Florida is incredibly biodiverse. I think that's one of the states. There's a lot of states that like I don't want to live really socially, but as far as like wildlife and biodiversity go, like Arizona, Utah, and Florida, I think are some of the coolest places on the planet.
I would agree. Just from my 6, 7 months here, I would definitely agree with that. And I think there's a different relationship people have to nature here because it's so integrated into daily life. Like gators are walking down the street. Like people are just used to this. It's just a different way of life. And I think that's a really fascinating entry point into understanding how people think and experience the world around them.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's just crazy to think about like that gators are so, like these prehistoric like deadly lizards that are incredibly dangerous and can be quite aggressive. I'm glad to know that there's some places that still we can't or we don't and um the Western mind is so used to its convenience, is so used to displacing as much of the rest of the world in order to get its own little thing as comfortable as possible, that there's still places here that you just can't dominate those forces of nature, that you have to coexist with them and kind of yield to them a lot of the times.
That's very true. I really would love to know a little bit about how your relationship to place has changed because it sounds like you've had a very vivid relationship to your environment from an early age. Has that changed over time as you've grown older and gone on hikes alone, like practice solitude?
Yes, I think that mystery has always played a part in that, and where there's mystery, there's usually coupled with a little bit of fear. And it's interesting now at this point in my life to go out at night by myself into a place which has wild animals, which are a lot more active at that time, and not And think about when I was a kid, and it would be like, man, if I imagined doing that as a kid, just imagining doing that would put fear into my gut because of all of the unknown. What's lurking out there where I can't see, and it was a relationship to the unknown that ignites a certain degree of fear and unease. And over time, over the course of my life, I have felt the fear of the dark, the fear of being alone in the dark completely change. And now, I'll go, and as soon as I start like a night hike and it's just the crickets are going, and I'm like, man, this is going out to me. This is replaced like going out to a bar. It's like there's no place I'd rather be. I'm just immediately at ease. And I think that over the course of my life, I have conducted a series of investigations into the dark and the unknown in ways that started kind of as morbid curiosity. And when I was in my teens, early 20s, but like early teens through early 20s, I was kind of fascinated by like the paranormal and cryptids and ghosts and things like that. And instead of going on hikes, it was, let me see where I found this database online of like places in Missouri that are supposedly haunted. And me and my friends would like go to these places and try to get spooked, and it was like, I want to see if I can experience some kind of paranormal thing. And in my mind's eye, it was like, there was this certainty that there was going to be this feeling that things would get cold, there'd be the sinking dread, there'd be this malevolent, like watching a movie, that all the emotional and psychological things would converge into this distinctly weird experience of fear and the unknown and some strange thing, and it was me pushing my fear in that element. And I remember going to this place called Old St. Louis Road, which I just remember reading the description just creeped me out so much because it was this road that was so far out in the middle of nowhere. It's like gravel road that goes through the woods. And they're like, if you stop your car like in the middle of the road and roll your windows down, like some bloody person like comes out of the woods and just casually starts talking to you. And I was like, oh, that would scare the shit out of me. Like, let's do that. And I think we went to this place several times. A few friends of mine and I did. And I remember this one experience of like graph going like this. And it was this experience of like, there's nothing out here. Getting out of the car and hearing all the crickets and just sitting there in silence and being like, nothing's going to happen because there's nothing out here. And it was kind of disappointing because it goes, oh, there goes that mystery fantasy thing that I had, there it goes. It just sort of floats away in front of you and you just kind of go, oh, you mean being out in the woods at night is just like the day, but it's dark, it's boring, and there's nothing happening and nothing's going to happen. Like, really? That's it? This is kind of anticlimactic. But then it made me realize as I kind of ruminated on that for a while, I was like, oh, there's not really anything to be afraid of out there. It's stuff going about its business. It has no interest in me whatsoever. There's no malevolent thing out there. You know, I mean, I think, you drive past a spooky, dilapidated house and you go, okay, there could be malevolent things out there. But the closer you are to some form of civilization, like, or like the outskirts of civilization, like, yeah, I could see how it's like there might be crazy people out there or whatever. But I don't know, that kind of started the domino effect of turning what was scary into something kind of peaceful. It's like the moment you see Boo Radley for the first time versus the moment he starts like really interacting, and you go, actually, you're not this scary thing that wants to harm me. Like, now I actually realize that you're kind of sweet and lovable, and there's a lot to really like about you. And I think even like some of the dilapidated houses, you might meet some real charming, nice, funny, interesting people in their own right, and it's easy to project some kind of thing of like, scary hillbillies that, are cannibalistic or whatever, that's a lot of that is such a fiction. And so there was an experience of being like, "Oh, that's a bummer." There's this whole exciting world that I had created in my mind that maybe doesn't exist. So that shaves off, like, in your mind, all this potential experience that maybe you won't get to have. But it opens up all of a sudden this whole new world of, "Oh, wow, there's actually really cool stuff out here just waiting to be discovered, and it's not exactly threatening me or saying, 'Go away.'" I mean, sometimes it does, but all you have to do is be like, "Oh, okay, bye," you know? I had a coyote, like, barking at me the other day because I was following it, and it was, like, basically giving me, like, "Hey, stop." And I was like, "Alright, message received." So now, yeah, when I go out at night, I'm like, this is the opposite of what it used to be in my mind. It's not scary. It's actually the place where I feel the most at peace because it's left alone by all the people that are scared. And the people that are scared, I think, are the people to be the most scared of, or, like a collective group of people that are all scared. Like, that's unpredictable. I don't know where that's going. But when you go out to a wilderness that's just left alone and everything's going about its business and just does not care about anything else but like doing its little nightly ritual or whatever, that is completely, I can't think of a more peaceful setting than that. And it's alive and it's awake and like there's critters rolling around in the dirt and it's just so, it's like being at a theme park. It's ridiculous. It's so fun. It just comes alive for you. And I love that. It makes me so happy.
Do you think that those experiences, spending time outside and spending time in solitude, have changed how you tell stories through your art or through music?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious experience is that you have time to think. Your thoughts become clearer. You can actually really kind of get in touch with how you're thinking and how you're feeling. The you get present, and all the distraction and the noise melts away, and you're able to kind of hear your thoughts a little more clearly. And I, a lot of the times, am talking or praying or meditating, and so like reflecting on my hike. So there's a lot that I work through emotionally, and it's a lot of times I'm going on a hike deliberately because I'm wrestling with something emotionally, and I know that like it will automatically do things to me to be out in that kind of environment and to be out in solitude. But it also, if I'm not rushing it, if I'm not going, well, I've got to get this hike in and then I've got to get back home and get a shower in before I go to bed because I got to work in the morning and I'm kind of being expedient about it, then it opens up the sort of spontaneity that I think that a lot of artists talk about, in that sort of free associating state, that play state, that flow state of, I've got all the time in the world and let's see where this goes. Let's see what's this path leads to. Oh, this connects to that. I didn't know that. I didn't realize I would end up here. And like, oh, there's this old rusted up thing that's like kind of discarded off into the woods that I never would have found out here. I wonder how old this is. I wonder how long it's been here. It looks like it could be, and your mind starts going in all these directions. There's a canyon up in the mountains not far from here, that's like, it's got waterfalls and a little river that goes through it. And at the bottom of one of the like waterfall areas, there's like a axle to a truck. And I'm like, I've tried to imagine, like, what is this, from like the early 1900s when they were coming in here and like doing infrastructure, or is it from like 2010? Like, how old is this thing and how did it get out here? Because did you have to fly a helicopter out? So it's just like, when you really notice things, when you're really taking your time and you're relaxed and there's nothing, you're not timing yourself, you're not doing your little run or whatever, and you're not just chatting away with your friend that you're on a hike with, where you can easily still take your problems of the world with you on that hike and just hash them out into that setting. There's a whole kind of experience of discovery that happens, and that is the creative thing, the creative method of seeing what's there, seeing what gets presented to you, as opposed to kind of forcing something or trying to create an idea. You're open to things, and you're being things are being revealed to you and sort of given to you like little gifts. and it's that's a very special thing. And I think that it's becoming a central part of my creativity, not just in what it does for my creativity, but now what I want to say creatively is talking about these places because they are so magical and I mean really magical. It's insane. Some of the hikes I've been on recently where I was like, I feel like I'm in a fairy tale right now. It's like crazy. It's like you couldn't have it's like I feel like I'm Alice in Wonderland. It's crazy what is happening, you know? And I always say a little prayer whenever I enter a place, whenever I enter some kind of natural place that I went to intentionally, even not intentionally, but usually I'm going there intentionally. But I usually say a prayer or an intention, or I speak out some gratitude out loud. Hello, thank you for welcoming me into this environment. I'm here to only respect and enjoy. I do not wish to disturb anything. I just want to enjoy and observe. And if you want to show me anything cool, I would appreciate that. I would love to see some cool stuff. If I have stuff in mind that I want to see, I'll say it. I'd love to. I've been wanting to see a tarantula lately. If you want to show me one of those, that would be so cool. If not, I'm still grateful to be here and I'll be happy with whatever I get. Thank you so much. And I usually, when I leave, I say thank you to the place. And I found that it responds to that. I really do believe I've always struggled with, abundance and manifestation, but when I go outside, I'm like, oh, this shit's real. It's real because if you like humble yourself before it goes, all right, I got you. Bet I'm gonna show you some cool stuff. You're not even gonna believe it.
Yeah, I definitely have experiences like that as well. I had a period where I was really into whale watching, and I would go on trips by myself, and it was sort of like creating a pause from chaos. And I would ask the universe or whatever to provide a whale. um, please, please let me see at least one whale and let them jump out of the water. And that always happened every single time. And it was so cool. But that does like create this bond where it's like,
Mhm.
I can be patient and see what comes out of that experience and be open minded.
Yeah, it's in those moments you're like, I am a part of this. I am not. It's something I'm communicating with something that says, yes, I appreciate you too. Let me show you what it is that you are appreciating. And I feel like that, like in my proverbial sense, like brings me to my knees. Like I feel so like, whoa, it's almost like an angel like coming up in front of you and being like, behold, and you're like, wow, okay, like, well, and it's like, look upon me. I do not be afraid, but look at me. And you're like, wow. And seeing a breaching whale, my buddy went whale watching and he told me about like looking into a baby whale's eye and like just that experience of it, like looking back at you. And I think that is something that I've been kind of writing about a lot lately and sharing on my social media platform. And I've found that kind of attitude is really resonating with a lot of people. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that they had that thought, but they didn't have the words for it. And the way I describe it is sort of this feeling of like seeing something and it's walking along like a little beetle and you pick it up and you look at it and you go, there you are again. Hello, old friend. We actually haven't seen each other in a long time, but I recognize you because we come from the same origin. We just diverged so long ago that if you get lost in the minutia of your own solipsistic world, you forget that there's a lineage. And so it's like, this is family. This is a thing that you like split off from and you haven't seen it in a long time. So it's like seeing an old friend. You can greet it like that. You can greet it like it is like it does have that relationship to you because it literally does. We just feel so far removed from that. It's hard to conceptualize or fathom that, but that that is what it is. I think of it as this like little light, like a candle, like when you separate candles, and that's all that has kind of happened. Someone lit a candle and in our Christmas Eve church service, they hand out candles to every person, and then someone takes the like nativity candle from the pulpit and lights a candle, and everyone passes it along. And that's a very moving experience to be a part of when you're in a room that gets warmer all of a sudden and brighter because everyone's holding this little flickering flame, and it's kind of, lapping and making those noises in front of you, and the hot wax is dripping onto your fingers. And that's it. If I don't really go to denominational church or anything anymore, but I really do appreciate some of those moments, and do really acknowledge what a spiritually profound kind of experience that is, of like that collectivism and being in that, sharing part of a whole, you know, being represented in the symbolic form. And I feel like that's what we all are as organisms. We're all these little candles. And so, harming an organism is like you've blown a candle out. And there's only so many, and if we're not careful, if you blow it all out, that flame is gone, and it's gone for good, until maybe another candle starts somewhere else, somewhere, but I just think it's like when if you're in church and you accidentally blow your candle out, it's like, you got to get your sister or something to like relight yours. There is that, on some level, that sense of scarcity of it, the sense of like, this is finite. There's only so much that we have of it. I think that we've gotten so careless with our blowing out of these candles, and I feel like one of those people that when my candle blows out, I'm like, I want to relight this immediately. I feel the sense of like the loss of it, or the preciousness of it is not lost on me.
I feel like it's a very timely conversation to have, talking about preserving these environments that are endangered and becoming more and more endangered. I'm curious what you would like to see other people experience from nature that you've had.
Well, I've had a lot of fun lately because I think it is rubbing off on people. All kind of starting to think about it more. And so like some people have even asked me like, "Hey, can I go out with you when you go hiking?" And I had a newer friend of mine, a guy that this was like our first time. Like he came to one of the shows we had at the house, but I met him like randomly through Instagram. It was just, he stumbled upon me, and I, just being curious, like saw him interacting and just went and saw his like computer, like 3D generated art that he was making. And I was just like, oh, this guy seems cool. And he lives nearby. Cool. And so we've kind of struck up a little bit of a friendship. And he was like, I would love to come hiking with you. I took him out with my friend Lauren, who's been going a little bit more consistently with me now because Lauren did the same thing. And it's like it's this interesting thing where like the first few times going out, it was Lauren just watching me pick up these, scorpions and centipedes and spiders and stuff. And now when we go out, every time I go hiking with Lauren, he's barefoot. He does the same amount of distance I do, and he starts picking up wolf spiders. And this guy, Henry, came out on this hike with us, and I picked up an eliode, which are those little black beetles. If you've ever seen them on the trails, like they're the most abundant thing. Like they're everywhere. If you don't see anything else on a trail in Griffith Park, you will see an eliode. They're just everywhere. I picked up this big one because at night there are always big boys that come out, and the experience of like letting Henry hold it was very interesting for me because like Lauren was like, yeah, like no problem. And Henry, you could sense he was like that first feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is so tingly and weird. And I could sense he was excited by it, a little repulsed, and a little like, he's like, wow, how do you guys do that? I get the sense that it like, if you've made it this far, there's a curiosity in you, and it's hard for me to believe that curiosity dies here. It's gonna keep going in some way, maybe not to the extent that mine does, but I just think it's really cool when people, my neighbor Christian, who I just saw last night, he started, him and Danny, his roommate, have started an urban garden, and they're kind of it's a nonprofit now that they're working on, like rewilding a lot of areas in Los Feliz and Silver Lake, and they kind of want to expand that more. But he was talking yesterday about how familiar he is now with plant life, which I'm less aware of. Definitely like the fauna is more of my interest than the flora. But I love when I'm going on a hike with him and he's like, oh, this plant here, like they apparently use this as like a remedy for that. And like, oh, but these will in the springtime, these will flower in a specific way, and it's cool to be around people that like induct you into this world and sort of like by osmosis. It's cool to see people learn something or like start to kind of experience something for the first time and go, whoa, this is interesting, this is weird, this is cool, oh, I didn't know that. I think that that's always been something that I've been interested in as an artist, and I think that that is what is kind of a central kind of guiding thing for me, is that having grown up in a church, I do feel that there is a sense of influence of preachers. I don't want to be preachy per se, but I think that there is something that has impacted me throughout the course of my life, of people who say, okay, sit down and let me express the thing as I've seen it. And maybe you will have an experience inside where you go, oh, wow, that affects me. Maybe I will think about, as I go through my day tomorrow, maybe I'll be thinking about that. And maybe it'll cause me to go on because that was what happened to me with a lot of people that I moved me in a certain way, where you go, oh, well, your path gets altered a little bit and you start to find yourself a little bit more and what you're about and what you really care about. Um, and I think that's of interest to me, is in a sense education and inspiring people in a sense, getting people to see things, that I've seen and go, whoa, hopefully be as moved by those things as I was when they happened to me. I want to share that. I want to pass that along.
Yeah, I think there's something so important right now about preserving ideas and passing them on to other people, especially in terms of like what I think you are doing, sort of these embodied practices and kind of displaying them, but also sharing them with other people. Because I do think that we're sort of in a crisis of disembodiment, and it's progressing as time is going and as technology is developing the way it is. Like something that we've spoken about in the past, the colonized mind, the way that the mind shapes based off of your environment over time. And I have a little bit of a concern about people's capacity for these experiences shrinking over time. So I do think there's something really valuable in that message of allowing your mind to be transformed by these ideas and passing them on.
I think part of where the confusion for me, in terms of where I'm at in my life right now, is partially coming from is that creativity and art like oftentimes lives in mediums and it's abstractions, conceptual things that are symbolic of something else. And I think that, as especially I get more and more sucked into the digital world and I don't know how much I can really stand just my whole life feeling like an abstraction and feeling like a lived life. What I'm feeling the resistance in my body to be like, no, don't let your mind be colonized. Like, do things with your hands. Go out and do things with your physical self. Go to places, you know, actually have the experience, like a grandeur of making a conceptual work of art and it doing really well could also be you could have probably just as much of an experience doing something very simple that is engaging you physically and engaging your body and your mind. And I'm starting to really see how much value that stuff really has, more so than I really did, that I took a lot of it for granted growing up. I think I was so enticed and seduced by all the sort of promises of ideas, either creative ideas or the idea I would have about what happens when these things are accomplished. It's all living in the imaginary world, the abstract world, the fantasy world. And I'm really realizing, like, well, the physical world is not to be overlooked, especially considering that it is becoming less and less prevalent, but its benefits to us are so important. I think realizing that, like, oh, they are, you can't really have one without the other. They're dancing with each other at all times, and that I fear what happens when the physical world becomes this afterthought or this thing to escape, um, it's like cutting off half of ourselves. And it's the most vivid one. It's like it's all real and you can feel it and taste it and touch it and see it. Like, your imagination and simulation can only do so much, but this is all right here. But you and I are definitely both interested in certain anarchistic trains of thought. What is it like to get out from under the rule of concepts and hierarchies and this is the way it is and this is the way it isn't, and instead just really be able to disconnect from language and presupposition and judgment and intellectualization and abstraction and just be completely in the physical world to the most spiritual degree. I still don't know. It's so new to me. I've been so plugged into this, this way of thinking that it's really hard to disconnect from. But I'm interested in really lately exploring that further, seeing what's down that rabbit hole.
I think that's a very rich place to explore. And it has to do with this sort of unlearning process, right? Like unlearning these categories, how we see the world through these different boxes. But breaking those boxes helps us create better. It helps us relate to
Hmm.
each other better, connect better, especially at this time in society and as we move forward. I think those structures of how we're taught to think about the world can be very extractive and disconnect people from their sense of place, their sense of belonging, their spiritual practice, all of those things. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's a really important thread throughout the whole project and through this conversation. So thank you for touching on that.
I've been hearing the word embodiment a lot lately, and it's been one of those words that's been hard to connect with. I think it felt um kind of vague, and I think lately it started to make a little more sense to me. As we enter into this project and the use of that word, I'm like, I think, I mean, literally that, to embody, to and I realized that that was so symptomatic of my complacency within the abstraction of our culture, that I live in my mind, and I have almost let my mind be the only real thing. This completing addition to sort of my spiritual framework of the physical and the spiritual being linked, because I think for a long time it was like, well, the spiritual transcends the physical instead of it being, and so it's like, oh, embodiment means to return from, at least that's what it means to me, like the abstraction, and to get present again within your senses and the wisdom within your physical self, but yeah, that frustration of vernacular, I think, has come from the fact that languages can be so abstract if they're used in like certain type of way. I think that it really is incredibly simple, um, and that we try to make it so grand and so grandiose, and that, like, when you do go out on a hike, sometimes it's boring. Sometimes you're like, it's a gray day and there's nothing out, and you're like, all the sticks are brown, but I'm here, the wind feels kind of good, but this is it, I'm here, and this is it. It's so simple. It's so just like, it's all just right here. It's just right here. Try to enjoy it if you can, but you don't have to, like. And I I like art that brings you to a point of you going, "Oh, I discovered a feeling on my own." And that I love artists that aren't going to explain what they mean by something. But admittedly, I struggle with that sometimes. I think a lot of times I want to tell you exactly what I mean and go, "This is my opinion." And it's right there. Well, and I think in that way, that is where the sort of like preacher influence comes in. Like, it's like, I'm not just a conceptual artist. I do have goals and intentions and things that I want to be and want to explore, you know, well, how can I explore what is in me without it having to mean anything, And that is accessible. You can't complain about the way the world's going if you're not engaging in something kind of equitable. And that's my feeling about like when people crush bugs. I get really pissed off. I'm like, stop bitching about the state of the world. Oh, people suck. Oh no, a spider. And I'm like, as above, so below.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point about terminology. Going back a little bit to the
Mhm.
embodiment term, things have been therapized overly so, where things feel out of reach and do have this top down energy. Language is a huge part of how to frame a project like this, where it's pulling on academic perspective, but also community perspective. And I think that's a piece that is very important for other people to hear, especially academics. So thank you for sharing how you feel about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening to me and letting me on here to talk. I'm super excited about this project, and I think others are going to be super stoked, pun intended, to have this conversation as well. And what you're trying to archive and is very interesting, and I think there's a lot of similar collective thought. I think you'll
Mm.
be probably surprised by a lot of the similarities in how people are thinking. But again, you're probably going to get a lot of interesting, fresh stuff which with each person. It was so exciting. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Thank you so much, Ford. Thanks for being here. I appreciate your time and your stories so much.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks for listening to Sight and Sound a Living Atlas. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Ford Fanter. It was a great episode. It was a great conversation. I think Ford is a great storyteller. It's very engaging as a guest. Thank you again, Ford, for being here and for contributing to the Atlas. If you have questions or just want to know more about Ford's work, I do have a little write up on the Substack about his projects, about his poetry, and featuring some of his work there. If you would like to know more about Sight and Sound, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to collaborate. I'm always looking for more collaborators, more feedback, just support to make sure that everything is flowing well and makes sense and feels accessible. So let me know. I'll be here. We'll see you next time.